welcome back to the Surfcast Podcast. We are recording this episode in January of 2025. That's right, isn't it, Toby?
Yes.
Okay.
Last time I checked, yes.
Oh, boy. 2025. And, you know, for me, the month of December, I usually don't miss fishing too much. It's sort of like the wind down and sort of rest and get things back under control and clean things and, you know, the wife's happy, etc. And then it starts to set in, the withdrawal starts to set in. That usually doesn't hit me until like the end of February, when there's like the inkling of like, it's, you know, March is coming sort of thing. It's hit me. I don't know what it is about this season and what this heck's going on this winter, but I'm there. I've been having hardcore withdrawals, and there's something about the way the weather has been recently. It's been cold, so I don't know why, but it's been triggering that sixth sense I have. It's been making me think fish, and I don't know why. I don't know why, Toby. So I'm ready to go, and I'm already getting like butterflies in my stomachs at times because I'm getting so excited already. So
it hasn't hit me for like the spring yet, but I have been, as I've been kind of touching base with you here and there about it, I've been doing my like super simple holdover. I kind of keep tabs on them, and I'm going a little later into the year than I normally do because they're still there. Like I literally the other day I fished for 30 minutes. I almost just like to check in. Be like, hey guys, you're still there. I got a couple. See you later. You know, I don't run up numbers. I don't fish on the coldest days. I don't, you know, there's no reason for me to like put extra harm on these schoolies, like small schoolies, just to like serve my ego through the winter. But I don't mind poking around and seeing if they're there. Even if I get a couple hits, I'm like, okay, cool. They're here still.
yeah,
Like that's almost enough for me to tone it down and like, all right, think about something you can actually deal with right now.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, that's nice that you've got those little things to entertain yourself and sort of keep the addiction in check a little bit.
Yeah,
That's cool.
it definitely helps.
Yeah. So today we're gonna do listener questions. We haven't done this for a very long time. I don't remember the last time we did it, Toby, but it was last spring, I believe. So it's been
Too
a
long.
while. What's that?
It's been too long. I wanted to do them a little more frequently. And I think because of the season chugging along, we kind of, even though we were getting plenty of questions and having a lot of interactions with listeners, we kind of had so much other stuff going on that it's been on the back of my mind to jump back into it. And I'm glad we got to it today.
Yeah, it seems like a good moment to do this. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to say where we got the questions and who asked them this time around. Frankly, I can't remember what we did last time. Excuse me. So we're just going to do it that way, this time, excuse me. And maybe next time, if you don't want your name read, you should tell us because we're going to do it this time. So, Toby.
We're not saying what time of day you sent them, so you're cool with your boss. You weren't sending us messages through Instagram and YouTube while you're supposed to be working.
Yeah, that's right. So, Toby, I'm going to ask the first question. You ready?
Yep.
So the first question we got was from mcarmen299 on YouTube. And it's a great question, and it gets to something I've wanted to kind of address, and is, what is a big fish replacement for the SP minnow? Now I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to cut in before Toby gets a chance to talk. I'm going to cut right in. I want to make something very clear. I do not think that the SP minnow is not capable of catching big fish. I am 100% on board with the fact that the SP minnow can catch big fish. I'm even on board with the idea that the SP minnow can be the best lure to catch big fish in the right situation. It is a tool, and it is a lure that has a use, just like just about every other lure has, including Dave Anderson's Sharpie with the hooks in it. There is a time and a place for every lure. If you don't know that story, go back and find it in Striper History on Google or something. There is a time and a place for everything. And no, I'm not just saying that, you can throw the SP minnow out when they would bite anything. No, I agree. There are times when the SP minnow is going to outfish other things. So, before we even talk about a replacement, I just want to make that clear. And I want to say, though, the reason that I get a little creeped out or a little weird about the SP minnow, and I don't know what Toby's reasoning is exactly, but it's because guys and gals end up using the SP minnow. They catch small to moderately sized fish. Then they keep using it more. Then they catch more of those size fish. And then that's all they want to use. And then that's all they do use because they're too afraid to move off of it. And I think that's my problem with it, because it is such a good, effective tool for catching smaller to moderately sized fish. Anglers feel like if they don't use it, they're missing out on something. And so then that's all they use. So that's probably why you see Toby and I, if you're watching on YouTube, looking at each other kind of sarcastically or making like snide remarks about it. It is a good lure. It is a good lure for what it does. So that's what I want to say first. Toby, did I capture anything about how you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely to a degree. You know, for me, I own some. I've got them. They don't come out essentially ever. But I don't look at it as like a replacement one-to-one for it. Like, it's not as easy as that for me. Like a one-to-one replacement for big fish. I don't even like. I'm not looking to replace the SP minnow. It's like I've already got stuff. You know, there's other lures that, as you kind of said, are maybe better tools for bigger fish. And it's not, even if it was a universal replacement, it's still not going to work everywhere because, you know, there might be a darter location or a needlefish location or glide bait. So I don't even look at what I am throwing in place of the SP as being a replacement for it. It's just, it's not the right tool for what I'm trying to do.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. And I agree. I think that for this particular person asking this question or anyone listening, and they're like, well, I use the SP minnow a lot, but you're right, I don't catch as many big fish. What should I use to replace it? And expecting us to say something like, well, use the Bomber 17A, or pick up a redfin, or use the big mag darter, or the hydro minnow. I think what I'm gathering from you, Toby, is that's not what you would suggest at all, and I don't think that's what I would suggest at all. And in fact, if you pushed on me hard and you're like, I'm in the situation where the SP minnow is the best thing, I would say needlefish. I would say pick a needlefish and use a needlefish and try to learn the needlefish, because probably if you're in heavy current, if you're swinging it, if there's slender bait, whatever your reasoning is, I think that the needlefish can fill that niche.
Yeah, I was sort of leaning that way, trying to think it through. Like, where do I still consider it going into the bag? Well, that's on a sand, like a bigger open sand beach. Well, let's just say I had the SP in my plug bag and something else, what would that something else be that I'd immediately go, well, that's a better choice? And right there, like a super strike needlefish would be, I'd jump probably right there.
Yep, exactly. And I think that that's a good place to start. Now, the SP minnow is a pretty noisy plug with a lot of activity. So if you're accounting for that, an off-the-cuff sort of quick answer that I would say is you might be surprised what you catch with a glider. So, which is another interesting option that looks nothing like an SP minnow. So yeah, that's two of the things I would say.
All right. Our next question comes in through YouTube, and it was posed by Disco Fish 1985. And he says, or she says, don't reel straight on all lures except the bucktail? Agree or disagree?
Yeah, that's paraphrasing. That's not exactly what they said, but that's pretty close.
So that was off of our discussion. We had the whole episode on that, right?
Yes.
It was a full episode on and I think it kind of got triggered out because a lot of, I said there's nothing I throw that I don't add something to.
That's
some
right.
sort of extra augmentation of the retrieve. The bucktail is probably the closest I come on what I throw where I don't add anything, but I still do. I add the least amount. If something like a darter, for instance, gets 80% of the retrieve, I'm adding something. I'd say a bucktail jig is 10%. Like, it's that far on the other end, where a lot of it is just a straight. But I still like, as I described too in that episode, I remember I like to add a little something to represent that fleeing food source, that if there's a fish thinking about it, and I'm putting way more into it than they do, but if they're thinking about striking my jig, maybe it escaping is enough to make them strike. So I have to add even the tiniest bit.
Yeah. I think it's situational for me with the bucktail, but I actually will admit, although it makes it sound like I'm doing something wrong, I'm definitely not, but I will say that if I'm swinging a bucktail in something like a breachway, an inlet, or other places that are similar with a lot of current, there are plenty of casts, maybe not a whole night, but there are plenty of casts where I am just swinging it near the bottom, trying to keep it off the bottom. Again, he's not the first person to ever say this, but the very John Skinner thing of getting it near the bottom, tapping the bottom, swinging it across the bottom, that kind of thing. And I really am not doing anything. But I wouldn't say that I do it all the time or every night. That almost every night I'm going to add a little bit of a tap. And that might be the only thing. You said 10%. For me, it might only be 10%. It's just a little rise or a little bit of just a little jig. Not snap jigging and letting it fall up and down, but, yeah. So I think I would tentatively agree with him, but with an asterisk. Disclaimer. So, yeah. So the next one comes from Spicy Hippo. Fantastic name. On Instagram. And this was one that was asked way back when we first solicited, and we weren't sure what we were going to do with it, so we set it aside, but we're going to answer it now. And that's that, do you ever use poppers at night? So I'll let you kick it off, Toby. I'll ask you, do you use poppers at night?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep my answer pretty short here in that I have, but not frequently enough, because I just have not dedicated the time to building the confidence level in them. However, I have enough experiences that have been relayed to me by guys that I'm friends with, that I consider knowledgeable, that I know I should. So it's not something I'm doing yet. And I'm specifically with the poppers referencing the Super Strike 2 3/8 and heavy load little neck. Okay. Not the floater. I'm sure other poppers do work, but that's the one that I have played around with. I have caught a couple of fish on and mean to add into rotation more often, but haven't yet.
You don't pop it, though?
Nope. It's yes, I do.
Okay.
But not in like the I'm working it for a bluefish mentality of working that thing hard. The way I've done it, and it was based on guys who do it regularly and had success, is that it's similar to, I always reference it, a darter retrieve, where it's a steady crank around that speed, which makes it swim and wobble like a metal lip, and then I'm adding the pop to it, but it's more the extra jump that I'm doing, like the bucktail, like the darter, like the needlefish, like anything else I'm already doing. It's not your popping retrieve.
Interesting. So I will say that in my meditations on what I do right and wrong, thinking about my weaknesses and strengths, which I think every angler should do, because I think it makes you a better angler because you identify things. I will say that using poppers at night, I often cite as a weakness of mine because I don't do it either. And I think that there are too many stories and other anglers have told me too many things for me to completely have it not represent any of my casts at all on a given night and a given season. And I've heard stories of guys hammering fish on pencil poppers at night. Of course, swimming the little neck popper by Super Strike or otherwise, and giving that little pops. I've heard all kinds of stories, and I've heard stories of using walk the dog lures, the spooks on the surface at night as well. Heard all of those things. And frankly, for largemouth bass, fly rod, which is a kind of a completely different thing, I understand, but that's all I do at night. I go out with poppers that I make myself on the fly rod at night to catch largemouth bass, and it is so effective. And just knowing that, and yes, okay, largemouth bass and stripers are two totally different things, yes, but there are so many similarities in their behavior and their attitude and such. It just feels like I'm missing out, and I think about that a lot. So I think fishing at poppers could potentially be something that I add to my goals for the 2025 season.
We've got something really cool to share with you today. Hogy Lures, a company that's been a favorite among Northeast anglers for years, is doing something completely new and unique. They're letting you, the listeners of the Surfcast podcast, help design their next surf fishing plug through the Franken Popper Project.
Yeah, so how it works is going to be really simple. They've set up a survey to find out how you actually use the popper in the surf. Hogy wants to understand the structure you fish, your go-to rod and reel, your time of year of actually using poppers, and key design attributes of things you actually prefer, like body size, shape, weight, and even color.
All right, so here's the deal. When you participate, you'll automatically be added to Hogy's best-kept secret, the field test offer list, which grants you early access to test unreleased products. And as a thank you for helping build this legendary surf popper, participants will get a special $10 gift code good towards their next order on Hoagie's website, HoagieLures.com.
So to participate, you can head over to that Hoagie site, or you can visit ours, surfcastpodcast.com/Hoagie Lures, or simply just check out the show notes because it's down there too. Just don't wait. Hoagie's only collecting responses for a very short time. And one more thing to know, Toby, that I know you'll like. This popper will be designed to be fished with just a single hook.
As we've talked about on past episodes of the podcast, the plastic swimmer is one of the most popular plugs that's found in just about every surfcaster's bag, and there are a ton of models to choose from. With its unique body shape and lip design producing a great darting and swimming action, the standout is the Swarter by Joe Bag's Tackle.
That's right, Toby. This plug is fully through wired, and it's available in two sizes, the 6-inch 1-ounce model and the 7-inch 1.5-ounce model. Comes in a wide variety of traditional and modern fish-catching colors like bone, blurple, sand eel, and many more. The Swarter excels in a huge variety of surf fishing conditions, from back bays to inlets, and of course, the wide open surf. It's been proven to be a great plug on both the East and West Coast for a variety of species, but particularly the striped bass.
So head on over to joebagsoutdoors.com and grab some Swarters while you support a locally owned business. And while you're there, be sure to check out the annual limited edition colorway, as well as Joe's Swarter kits, specifically tailored to meet a variety of surf fishing scenarios. So our next question comes from Kevin Medeiros 9281 over on YouTube. And he says, could you please tell me how to set a circle hook when retrieving a live eel? I'm doing something wrong and miss 50% of my bites. Thank you. My answer here is going to go for any circle hook, not just the eels. And it starts from before you even get to the water for me, meaning using a particular hook shape. So I'm using when I set up my circle hooks for chunking, for eeling, a straight eye. So it's non-offset. It doesn't go one angle or the other. And then I use the power snell, which sets the line coming through the eye, so that even at rest, it automatically produces a tendency to bend of the hook to hold it in place once it sets. Okay, so we start off there. You are already helping yourself out.
So important. Important. Yeah.
You can get away with just your regular knot attaching to the circle hook eye, sure, but it's a hair more effective, levels more effective to start with the proper hook eye and the proper knot. There's actually different knots you can use depending if you're actually using an offset eye one way or the other, but that's a whole other subject. Simplest form, no offset, and use the power snell so that the line comes through the eye towards the hook point, and that produces a curl in it. So once you've got that out of the way, you're not really setting the hook, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. Now, that's sort of the traditional point that has been made over years. You don't set the hook when you're using circle hooks, and then other guys still set the hook, and you really don't. You are setting the hook, but you're not doing the forceful. So what I do, whether I'm using the eel or I'm using a chunk, is I keep the rod overly vertical. When I was using J hooks, I kept it at, if you use the clock idea, maybe 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the rod is up at that angle. Then I would drop and set real quick. With the circle hooks, I'm almost holding it at the 12 o'clock to even back to the 11:45 position, because I want to have as much drop. I feel the first sense of a fish taking the bait, drop down. When that line comes tight, it's just come back to position. Come back to that where you had been retrieving it from or where you were chunking from, and the rod will load, and that rod then will set the hook into the fish's mouth. It often will take a couple of seconds for the fish even to realize what's going on, because you're not spooking them with the hook set. You're not jarring them out of what they were doing. They almost, I'm envisioning that they kind of feel a little something, maybe, you know, like you bite your lip, and that's they kind of continue what they're doing, and it takes a moment before they then do their first run, and that further sets it. So you're really not setting in their traditional manner. You let it do itself, come tight. Sometimes I'll retrieve a little bit of line if I don't feel like I'm quite there, but that's in short, that's how I, set the hook with a circle hook.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add two quick things because you're the expert on this. Excuse me. And the first is that I want to reiterate how powerful the snell is. You said a hair, and sometimes it can make a bigger difference. It makes a huge difference, I think. I think it makes all the difference in the world. So for the person who asked this question, if you're not doing that, that could be all of the answer right there. I really think, and I've seen that make a difference in a buddy of mine. When he went to that, it dramatically made a difference in his. And once you get used to that knot, it's actually really, really fast to tie too.
Yeah.
Like it's super easy.
It's become the easiest snell for me personally, probably because I've done it thousands of times now.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say about just observing Toby more recently is that drop to the lift is very slow. It's much slower than I think many anglers have the control to do until you kind of get it under your belt, because your inclination is to lift fast, which is not a set, but it's still much faster than what you might be envisioning. And the final thing I'll add, and I don't know if you noticed you do this, Toby, or not, but I've noticed it and I've integrated into me, is that I don't think you do this every time, but a lot of time it's a half drop and feel if it's still there. Mm-hmm. And if you feel the scritchy scratch or a little anything else, it's a full drop. And I think what that does is it lets you, so the half drop, there's nothing there, and then you just bring it back up. Mm-hmm. And those could be missed sets. So if you're getting a little scritchy scratch or a little tap, and you drop it all the way, and you come back and there's nothing, could have been a dogfish, could have been a whatever. And so if you're like, well, I'm missing a lot of hits, those half drops, we don't set the hook on them, because if you don't get that secondary, and you can tell a lot of times with the bass, they kind of just start going. They pick it up and they're moving. So, but that's another thing I've really observed from watching you more recently. So, thought I'd add that. The next is from William Fox on Instagram. How often are you sharpening your hooks, or are you just swapping them out? I'll start. I almost sharpen 0 hooks. For me, and there's two different reasons for this. The biggest just is that I have found that when I'm sharpening my hooks, you only get one sharpen, roughly. And then they're trash anyways. And so if I'm having to take the time to go through and check all of my hooks and sharpen them, and then the ones that I've sharpened, now I have to keep track of which ones have been sharpened. I got to go through them all again. It's like this extra step I don't want to deal with. But more than that, the reason I don't sharpen my hooks is because I don't live that close to the water. I fish every night of the season, almost. There's a lot of weekends I don't fish because I don't like fishing on Saturdays. But I fish like every night of the season. I'm exhausted all the time. I have a wife. I have multiple jobs. I have friends. And if I've got to check all my hooks, and I've got to sharpen all my hooks, and I got to keep everything rinsed, because otherwise my hooks are going to get rusty. When they get dull, I throw them, because this is part of my livelihood. It's my number one passion. So I'm just going to replace the hooks, because I want to make sure that every time I set the hook on a fish, I'm ready for an 80. Right, Toby? That's Toby's thing. I'm ready for an 80. That being said, there are some hooks I sharpen. I almost said shooks. There are some shooks I sharpen.
I think he says shum hooks.
Shum shooks that I sharpen. There are some hooks that I sharpen, and that would be the hooks on bucktails, because you can't replace them. And so they're often the big tinned hooks, and those can be man, I'm really on fire today. Those can be sharpened. But otherwise, I'm throwing them away. And I've started to go to more premium hooks, and the premium hooks, you really can't sharpen them. That's very diminishing returns. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of my thoughts on sharpening.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Right out the gate, if it's the black nickel finish, I'm not touching it.
Oh yeah,
for the hook file, because you're
yeah.
adding corrosion. They already corrode. When you look at them sideways, you add a little scrape, it's even worse. So if it's black nickel, if it's a chemically sharpened hook to begin with. I don't bother. I swap them out, and exactly when I'm throwing jigs, I have, so if I'm bucktailing, I have a hook sharpener on me to touch up the, your mustad hooks.
Yes.
I will say though, if I'm throwing jigs in the open surf, like a jig head with a shad body, a rubber eel, something like that on it, I carry so many of them in the same size. I don't actually sharpen those, even though I could. I don't sharpen them on the fly. I might sharpen them back home. I'll touch them up. But even then, I'm just quicker with those to swap it out for another one. Yeah. Bucktail with hair, like that traditional bucktail with hair and a pork rind or fat cow strip or otter tail, something like that. Those are the ones that I'm touching up as I go. But I'm real quick with those to swap them out for a fresh one. And I mean, it's kind of a touch on the wasteful side with those, but like you said, I'd rather be at 100% than even 98% when that fish hits.
Yes, and I do want to make that point. That's not to say that Toby and I are fishing dull hooks, because I only fish sharp hooks, and I spend stupid money on hooks that are not designed for striped bass, on a lot of different particular plugs, which is too long for this episode. But I pay premium dollar for premium hooks. So it's not that we're using dull hooks. It's just that as soon as they get a little dull, they're tossed, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Agree with that?
Yeah. All right, we got time for one last question. It's going to be a quickie, and I'm actually just going to pose it directly to you, Jerry, because this is more on your side of things, your expertise, so to speak. For what I even use is basically straight out what you use on the odd times that I do use this.
Okay.
So I don't have a whole lot to add, so I'm going to throw it to you. The question came over on YouTube again from Night Surf 3927, asking, just curious as to what kind of jig heads you are using with your 7.5-inch sluggos and similarly sized rubber baits.
Yes, great question. So I struggled with this for a while, getting something that would not tear the bait apart, that matched well, that didn't have a super long shaft but had a long enough one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And because the 7.5 has become such a weapon for me, with the Hoagie or the Sluggo being two things I carry all the time, the Z-Man Diesel. The Z-Man Diesel has become my go-to. It is a ridiculously strong, way overkill strong hook that is unbelievably sharp. It's just fantastic. They hold up really well. They don't break the bank, honestly. They're pretty good for what they are, because they are a premium level jig head and hook. And they just match up so well with the 7.5 inch because you can get them in 3/8 ounce head. You get them in 3/8 ounce head and 1/2 ounce head. And that's really where the rub comes. Because if you're looking for weights over 1/2 ounce, so 3/4 and up, there are other things. But a lot of times I'm throwing pretty lightweight. Even when I've got my 10-foot rod and I'm throwing them out there in the open surf, I'm using 3/8 and 1/2 ounce a lot. And the Diesel has really become my go-to. Really, really a huge fan. Fanboy, I would say. I think they're unbelievable, and I will just start preaching it to people, anyone who wants to listen, about those hooks in particular.
Yeah, you certainly convinced me on them, and I use them now. So I saw them. I had seen them when they first came out, but didn't give them the fair shake, and then you did, because you were in the process of trying to find that answer to that problem. So it was good that you had that going, and I tried a few things, and it was a quick swap out, and I buy them up whenever I can now.
Yeah, they're definitely the best. So thanks to everybody who made comments, who asked questions. Hopefully we'll get another one of these in a little sooner than a year, but because we definitely get a lot of questions and comments, and we appreciate the time you guys take to ask the questions. And know that even if we don't answer them right away, we do see them, and we're keeping track. And we will see you the next time on the Surfcast Podcast. This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.